Hey, what's up, everybody? Today I want to talk about something that plagues every single developer at least once in their career. Join in and we'll identify what it is and what you can do about it in this quick session. So there's something that plagues every single developer at least once in their career. And for most, it's going to happen a lot. And it's going to be this sensation that you have no idea what you're doing. With software development being such a sort of siloed task and something that you don't get to see a lot of the activity that your peers are doing on a regular day in, day out basis, it can feel both isolating, but also like you sometimes have no idea, absolutely no idea what you're doing as a software developer. Well, it turns out there's actually a formal name for this phenomenon that's very, very predominant in software engineering, but also in other disciplines and in other walks of life. So today we're going to talk about imposter syndrome in software development and you, very 30s old video style. So let's start first by talking about what exactly is imposter syndrome. Well, by definition, if you look it up online, imposter syndrome is a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. What I love about this definition is the last part, is feeling like you're going to eventually be exposed as this person that ultimately doesn't know what they're doing and are a total fraud. And I think psychologically, particularly for software engineers, you can totally feel that sensation of somebody's going to call me out that I don't actually know what I'm talking about. But the reality is that you are hired to do a job that is uncertain, and you're often blazing trails in terms of technology to find the way to do it. So as the nature of the work demands, you're actually going to be moving into uncharted territory, and that feeling of uncertainty is very, very natural as part of that. So more accessible definition and something that kind of typifies what most people feel when they're experiencing imposter syndrome is offered by Psychology Today. And it says, people who struggle with imposter syndrome believe that they are undeserving of their achievements and the high esteem in which they are in fact generally held. So if you're experiencing this as a software developer, you may, for example, not feel like you belong at tech meetups or even in company meetings, right? You may feel like you're unqualified for the job that you're applying for, or not feeling like you're qualified for the job that you're in. But ultimately, where I see this phenomenon most in engineers is not feeling like you have the capacity to perform tasks that are assigned to you. So whether you're learning to code or you're new to the field, or even if you're a senior engineer, there are always those moments when you get assigned a new feature or user story where you're like, this may be out of my depth. This may be an area that I just don't know enough about to meaningfully deliver for my team and for my company. And so it's really important to be able to name this phenomenon and say, okay, that's just imposter syndrome, right? So when you feel like a fraud, when you feel like this person that won't be able to deliver on your obligations, it's really, really important to deploy some strategies on how to overcome this sensation and this feeling of imposter syndrome. And the first thing to realize is that you're not alone. I've been in the industry for now 22 years, maybe more, and I still regularly get this sensation of, man, like this is like very, very heady stuff or complicated. Maybe it's an algorithm that I'm unfamiliar with, or there's this new technology involved in the problem that I need to solve, and you can totally feel like a fraud. And even with 22 years plus of experience, I can share that I still get that feeling on a regular basis. So if you're new to the field and you feel like this is something that is going to plague you throughout your career, just know that you need to just figure out how to deploy some strategies to overcome it. It is something that's going to come up for you from time to time. And we've first got to name it and realize that everybody feels this experience at one point or another. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, this is known as normalizing, and basically creating the sensation that this is a completely sane, normal, rational thing to happen, and it's not unique to you. So why is this so common in software development? Why do we all get this sensation of imposter syndrome? Well, the big thing and the big reason I think imposter syndrome is so rampant in our industry is that technology changes so rapidly. And oftentimes we get thrown into frameworks, APIs, libraries, even programming languages that we are often unfamiliar with. So this rapid change can make you feel like a fraud because you're just racing to kind of keep up with the pace of technology change. And that can really create that sense of uncertainty and not knowing as you dive into some of the work that you're doing. The other thing I think that we see in software engineering is that there's a never-ending amount of material to learn, right? Whether you are a senior engineer that's traditionally done web development, there's always AI, machine learning, computer vision. Like there's all kinds of stuff that you could dive into, right? You could even go into the marketing side and look at some of the marketing engineering or sales engineering, right? There's just an infinite amount of tributaries that you can explore in the field of software engineering, and that can be very overwhelming in and of itself. There's just an infinite amount of material to learn. You'll never learn everything there is to learn in software engineering, but also there's just an endless trove of resources out there for you to consume that you're never going to get all the way through, right? Another reason I think software engineers are often faced with imposter syndrome is you really tend to see a lot of strong opinions and personalities in the software engineering community. So whether you're using maybe the not most popular programming language, or maybe you're struggling to grasp some of the fundamentals of a particular framework, sometimes there are those that are unfortunately in the community that can come down pretty hard on you, kind of intensifying that feeling and that sensation that you're a fraud. But for me, I think the biggest reason why software engineers encounter imposter syndrome the most is what we do is so like kind of in a silo. We're very isolated in what we do as software engineers, and we can only see what our team is producing and what open source developers are producing, right? There's 80% to 90% of the software development world that we will never really see how those engineers actually do their job from a day-to-day perspective. And so it leaves you wondering where you fit. It's human nature to compare to one another in your peer group. So you don't know where you kind of calibrate, where you fit in from junior to senior spectrums, right? So if you're in the software engineering field or you're just entering the software engineering field, it's important to know maybe some characteristics of those that would feel most likely to experience imposter syndrome. We see it very, very commonly in career changers, those folks that do not have a computer science degree or may not have been programming since they were 12 years old or 16 years old or whatever, right? The fact that you're breaking into the industry a little late in life could intensify this feeling of being a fraud or not feeling fully initiated, whatever that means, to the software development industry. That can also be compounded by developers that don't have computer science backgrounds. So if you're coming in from a non-engineering degree, maybe you have a liberal arts degree or a humanities degree, you can very much be successful in the field, but it's natural for you to, at some point, feel like an imposter because you don't have the formal credentials. And then I think, too, there are those of us in the community where we don't fit the stereotype. Developers that don't look like me, a white cisgendered male, right? It can, when there are people in the community that look like you, it can make it feel more accessible, right? And that's why diversity and inclusion is just becoming so important in software, because we want people to be able to envision themselves in the field. And if you don't necessarily fit that stereotype of your typical nerdy software engineer, can even intensify that sensation of imposter syndrome. Okay, so I hope I haven't stressed you out. So what can you do about it? What strategies can you deploy to overcome the sensation of imposter syndrome? Well, the first thing to realize is to embrace the struggle, right? The fact that you're in software engineering or pursuing a career in software engineering, you've already taken a very important first step. And much of what we do as software engineers is struggling through a problem and working through it to ultimately arrive at the solution. We're always faced with problems that we don't immediately know how we're going to solve. So really just embracing that is an aspect of software engineering can be helpful in and of itself. And this one's really hard, especially if you're learning. But one thing to really work at is to stop comparing. Struggle is always going to be there, and everybody's going to bring different context to the work. Particularly in a coding bootcamp standpoint or in an educational setting, it's important to remember that everybody comes in with different levels of experience and different levels of initiation to programming. So it's really important to understand that your journey is your own, and everybody is on their own distinct and unique journey. And by the way, your outcome could be entirely different from some of your peers. Maybe you want to become a sales engineer or a QA professional where they want to become a full stack engineer, right? Stop comparing and kind of stay in your lane of your own journey, and that will help to combat imposter syndrome. The other thing that we think is just so vitally important is to learn together, right? Particularly if you are learning to code for the first time, it can feel incredibly challenging and almost insurmountable. And we've seen so many people endeavor to learn to code alone and just fizzle out because they feel like they're not good enough or they don't have the capacity to do it. And when you learn in a group, you can kind of commiserate and share in the struggle and normalize that sense of struggling. So that kind of helps you push ahead. So I would draw the metaphor of trying to arrive at a workout routine individually and kind of show up at the gym every day. Whereas if you're learning together in an exercise group or you have a buddy that's keeping you accountable, it can really help you keep focused, and it can really help normalize the fact that you are working through something that is very challenging by design, right? If it wasn't challenging, everyone would do it. The other thing that is really important is to measure where you're going, measure the progress. Dan Sullivan, a management sort of coach that I follow, I love this cliche that he has, which is focus on the gain, not the gap. So what have you meaningfully done in the last week or two that has advanced you as a professional? There's always going to be this sort of insurmountable level of knowledge out there in front of you. But how have you progressed as a professional in the last week, 2 weeks, last month, last quarter, right? Setting specific goals, writing them down, and checking in on those can really diminish that sense of feeling like a fraud and feeling like you don't belong in the industry. What you want to be able to demonstrate to yourself is that you're making consistent and routine progress towards becoming an even better professional. Another way you can reduce the sense of feeling like a fraud in this phenomenon of imposter syndrome is to lower the stakes, right? Bring the pressure down. So maybe you set a 3-year goal instead of a 1-year goal to learn to code. Maybe you learn in a boot camp before you go land that internship so that you can make mistakes in an educational setting that's welcoming and helpful, right? The other thing that you can do is you can find a team, find a crew of folks to learn with, and help each other progress through the work. And what you want to do is you together, once you feel psychologically safe, you can really stretch the capacity of what you can learn as a software engineer. So in educational design, we call this the zone of proximal development. If these strategies were useful and you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We're going to be regularly rolling these out. You can always catch us at launchacademy.com/YouTube. And if you're interested in advancing your career and actually making that first ever important first step of launching your career, we can help. So we have the career launch formula here at Launch to take you through 3 phases of software development education to help you ultimately land your first software engineering job. If you want to learn more, you can go to launchacademy.com syllabus and learn all about our programs, and we'll look forward to getting to know you better. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.